Welcome. My name is Dominic Alonkar. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Futurepreneur Canada. My role is to help people like yourself get their business off the ground. One of the challenges that entrepreneurs have is working through the cash flow. At Futurepreneur, we have a cash flow template, a step-by-step process to help you work through all of that technical stuff that you need to know. The cash flow template tutorial is broken down into 3 parts. This first part is the startup cost. The second part is the inflow of the cash flow, and the third part is the outflow of the cash flow. I encourage you to use this, to rewind, to pause, to replay it, to help you become the expert that I know you can become. So let's begin. You will need the Futurepreneur cash flow template found on our website resources page. Go to the Futurepreneur resources page and do a search for cash flow template. Download and save the cash flow template. You'll notice it has some automated functions to make your life easier. Let's open the spreadsheet. Notice the tabs at the bottom: Instructions, Past Purchases, Startup Costs, Cash Flow Year 1, Cash Flow Year 2, etc. The cash flow template covers 2 key elements of your startup finances: the startup costs of your project and your estimated cash flow budgeting covering the first 2 years. The startup costs tab includes everything that you need to make your first sale. In other words, what you need to have available on hand to be able to start your business. It includes, for example, equipment, starting inventory, leasehold improvements. In a minute, we'll take a closer look at this. Once you've completed this, you can move on to your cash flow projections. Cash flow is really money in, less money out for your business month by month. The goal is to show your estimated sales for the first 24 months and also your operating expenditures. So let's begin by looking at your startup costs. Click on the Startup Costs tab. Startup costs are money you need to get your business off the ground to make your first sale, usually within the first year. Let's do this step by step. For the purpose of this tutorial, we will use a fictional business, Amar's Protein Shake. Amar has created a state-of-the-art protein shake that is sold online and offers nutritional counseling. Keep in mind that you will need to adjust depending on your type of business. Step 1. Enter the approximate date you expect to receive your startup funding. For those applying to Futurepreneur Canada, it's going to be about 1 month after the submission of your application. In this case, we used November 2016. In Step 2, enter the amount of funding necessary to realize your startup costs. So let's take our protein shake example, Amar's Protein Shake. He's requesting $30,000 in financing. If you look at the options in Step 2, there are 5 cells. The first one is owner will contribute. That is another word for cash. Cash he will invest in the business. If you are applying to Futurepreneur financing and you require more than $15,000, you will also need to put in 10% of your own money into the business. However, if you've already purchased this in the past, then that counts towards the 10%. So let's take an example. If you click on the Past Purchases tab, you will notice that Amar's Protein Shake has already spent $3,200, some of it on a laptop, some of it on marketing material. So he has met the 10% requirement, and he is not obligated to put anything in cash. So let's go back to Step 2 and look at how the other cells are filled in. Under Futurepreneur loan funding, it's $15,000, which is the maximum you could get. Under BDC, it says $15,000, but in fact, the maximum is $30,000 from BDC. However, he only needs $30,000, and that's why he's filled in $15,000. The other 2 cells are for money that is required from another institution. So you can fill this in, such as a bank, a line of credit, regional economic development. So for each business, it may vary. Step 3. This is where you detail how the funds will be used. So what you do is you list the name of the items on the left-hand side. Keep in mind that you can modify and change the cells. So for example, you can delete accounting systems and replace it with something else, or you can leave it in. So, what do you need to start your business? You'll notice on the left-hand side, you have things such as lease, first and last month's rent. You can use it for insurance purposes, for permits, equipment, for example, or a laptop, office furniture, software, marketing, a website, and in this case, shipping costs. Anything that moves your business forward is fine in terms of what you're allowed to use the funding for. You'll also notice that there's a box for inventory. In that box, you can change and name the products. So in this particular case, it says nutritional products. He's estimating that he needs to order some inventory for his nutritional products. In this example, $9,200. However, things that you cannot use the money for are things such as research and development. So for example, if you're working on an app and it's still in its testing phase, if it's not in a beta stage, you can't use the money for development costs there. The same goes for people who are looking at a prototype. That prototype needs to be developed already. Salary should not also be included in this line or owner's draw. We will discuss that later on when we get to cash flow. Don't include money that's given to staff or subcontractors. However, if you do hire someone to do your marketing, for example, your logo, that's fine. That's part of marketing. So ultimately, everything that is needed to make your first sale can be used for financing. Working capital is money in reserve, which offsets what you have in terms of having more expenses than sales. Usually when you're beginning a business, you'll have a lot more expenses and you want to have some money in reserve to offset that. However, be careful that this amount isn't so large. In working capital, if you notice, it's $10,240. Be careful that this amount isn't so large that it eats up most of your funding. There's no magic number to avoid. In this example, it's about a third of the total funding. All you need to keep in mind is that you want to have wise use of your funds. But if you have too much money for money in reserve, then the question is, do you really know how to use and maximize your funding? Remember, this is a loan you need to pay back, so put the money to good use. Things such as marketing, equipment, inventory, insurance, any of that is going to be money well spent, and it moves your business forward. Now, let's get back to step 4. List the cost of each item under the column 4. You'll notice that all of the numbers add up to $30,000. As much as possible, get realistic assessments, and if you don't know some of the answers, then this is a good sign that you need to do further research or get further quotes or ask suppliers. Part of the responsibility on your end is to justify some of these numbers. We don't expect them to be dead on, but we do expect some kind of research. Step 5. Link for each item sources of funding to the costs that we previously identified. So for example, equipment and fixtures is $4,000. You will need to decide whether this comes out of Futurepreneur loan funding or BDC loan funding. Those are the only two sources of funding you have in this case. A good tool for you to keep in mind is you can also double check whether or not you're doing this correctly. So for example, under Futurepreneur loan funding, you can write in $3,000, and when you do, you'll notice that there's a negative $1,000 under balance check, which means you've done something wrong. The balance check must always be 0. So it's a way of just identifying to see if you've made a mistake. Also keep in mind that the total maximum amount of money that can come out of the Futurepreneur loan is $15,000. So as you start doing this, you'll start to see if in fact you go over $15,000, which means that in fact you've made a mistake. So there are checks and balances to make sure that the work you do here is correct. So just verify that as you start doing the work. The total should add up to $30,000 at 100%, and the balance and checks should all be 0 when you're doing this. Keep in mind when you do the startup costs that this should correlate to what you write in the business plan, so that the numbers you put in here can be found somewhere in the business plan or there's some explanation. Also, when you do your cash flow, you may find that you may need to go back and make some changes here and make some adjustments. It's the nature of doing a cash flow and a startup cost. It's a work in progress. Now that you've completed your startup costs, all this information gets transferred to the next step of the cash flow template. You'll have a chance to readjust later on with your startup costs. For now, let's move on to video part 2 where we look at the cash flow inflow and you'll be a pro in no time.